Hey guys, welcome to Talks in Class, or I should say, welcome back to Talks in Class. I'm Jenna. Thank you so much for joining me today. If you're new, welcome to the show. But if you're joining me again after my little hiatus, welcome back. It's been 3 weeks since I actually launched an episode. I did record an episode last week, but as some of you might know, my computer has been on its last leg for a long time, a lot longer than I should even admit. So I recorded the episode and I was able to do about half of the editing before my computer just said, nope, not today. So I had to abandon last week's episode, but I went and got a new computer. So we are back in business and there should be no more interruptions. New year, new me, new computer. I actually can't believe, though, that it's only been 3 weeks since my last episode because what a 3 weeks it has been. So much has happened. First things first, we moved across the country. So we did make it to LA. We did our big cross-country drive from Connecticut, which we were staying with family in Connecticut, to our new home here in LA. We took a week to make that drive, which was a good amount of time, I think. It would have been nice to have a little bit more time in a couple of spots that we stopped in, but by the end we were kind of done with the sightseeing and we were ready to be just in one place. So we left the day after Christmas and we drove down through Virginia, stopped to sleep, and then our first real stop was Memphis. We spent a day in Memphis and we did Graceland, which was so much fun. It's one of those places that we probably otherwise never would have visited because I can't imagine that we ever would have flown to Memphis to go to Graceland, but it was great. I really enjoyed it. I was not even expecting it to be so big and just they have so much stuff there. Like everything you could ever imagine. Everything from, his outfits and costumes and movie posters and memorabilia down to like paperwork for repairs and updates that they did to the Graceland property. Like it's crazy the amount of stuff and just history that's there. So it was pretty cool. And then from Memphis, we drove to North Texas and we spent a day in Denton, which is where I went to school and lived during undergrad and grad school. So I was in good old Denton for a long time. So I got to show Hubs around the old stomping grounds and we did the Denton Square and drove around UNT's campus. So that was fun. And then from there, we pretty much just had to drive and stop to sleep, but we had shorter drives. So we were able to do a little bit more on those days, even when we were driving. So we went through New Mexico, which was beautiful. And we stopped at the White Sands National Park on our way through New Mexico. It was gorgeous, you guys. If you ever find yourself in that area, I highly recommend it. The sand truly is white. And in a few of the spots, there's just sand dunes as far as you can see. And it's really incredible. I guess you can even sled in the sand dunes, which we didn't do. We only had a limited amount of time that we could spend there, but it was really cool. And then from there, just a quick stop in Scottsdale to sleep, pretty much. And then we drove to LA. I do wish we would have had more time in Scottsdale or just the Phoenix area in general because it seemed really cute and really pretty. And I've just heard a lot of good things about that area, but we had to get to LA by a certain date because our movers were showing up with all of our furniture and our stuff. So we kind of needed to be here. But on our drive from Phoenix to LA, we did stop outside of Palm Springs to see the dinosaurs from Pee-wee's Big Adventure. It does have a name, but I always just think of it as the Pee-wee dinosaurs. So it's this roadside attraction near Palm Springs, kind of in the desert. And they have these massive dinosaur statues. If you've seen the movie, you know. You can go inside of them, and it's really cute. We didn't spend long there either because we also had our dog with us through all of this. But it was fun, and it was a fun thing to see in real life, especially after having seen that movie several times. So overall, it was a good trip. We didn't really have any problems. We had some rain in Arizona, but other than that, good weather, no issues, uneventful, which is always good. I'm glad we ended up driving. Now that it's over, I can say I'm glad we ended up driving. We considered shipping the car and flying, but we got to do and see a lot of things that we otherwise probably never would have. So it was a good experience. But I'm glad it's over, and I'm glad to be here and finally feeling a little bit more settled. We set up we do still have some boxes, but we set up some of our stuff, and it just feels nice to have a home base after like a month and a half. So as always, I will start with my what good happened. Honestly, so many good things have happened since last time I've chatted with you all. The biggest, of course, being that we made it here and we have all that behind us. But I think more specifically, we got a really cool opportunity last week to attend a Netflix premiere for that 90s show in LA. And it was just a really fun and exciting thing to be able to do. We got to do this little photo shoot with some other content creators. So I got to meet some other nostalgia creators who I've interacted with a lot on social media, but never got to meet in real life. So that was really cool. It's always fun to meet like internet friends in real life. And then we went to dinner and we got to go watch the first 2 episodes of the show. That 70s show always had a really special place in my heart. I think it's just the Wisconsin thing, like growing up in Wisconsin. But even though I obviously didn't grow up in the 70s, the show always felt really authentic to my experience growing up. We just really did do a lot of nothing and just kind of hung out in people's basements. So I always really loved the show, and it was exciting to be able to go see, the new generation, so to speak. And what a fun welcome to LA. So this week, I want to talk about something that I've been talking about with a lot of people recently, which is kind of millennial style, fashion style, and our experiences as millennials now with so many of the fashion trends from our younger years popping back up into stores. But before we get into that, since it is the new year, maybe you are looking to do a little closet cleanup or update your wardrobe a little bit. And if you are, my clothing rental service, Jenna Barclay Style Box, is really a great way to do it with minimal commitments, which we love because fashion's always changing. So if you're new to the concept of clothing rental, don't worry, you're not alone. It is pretty simple. You just add a bunch of stuff that you like. You can browse the website and add a bunch of stuff that you like to your virtual closet. And then you rent from those items up to 4 items at a time that you can have at home. You wear them as much or as little as you like, and then you just send them back in the prepaid shipping return packaging that they give you, and you get something else. It's really as simple as that. There is also an option to buy at a discount, obviously, if you really love something. So it is the perfect way, really, to try new styles, new brands, new colors, whatever, without that commitment to buying them and taking up space in your closet and obviously spending all of this money on new clothing that you may or may not get a lot of use out of. All of the clothes are professionally cleaned, by the way, and inspected for any damage or, signs of wear and things like that before they're shipped out. So you're getting clothes that are ready to wear right out of the package as soon as they arrive at your door. It is also completely free to try for your first month. So if you want to try it out, just head to jennabarclaystylebox.com and click Get Started. That free month will automatically be applied. You don't need a code or anything to try it out. So let's talk about all of these 2000s and now even 2010s stuff that's popping back up in stores. I know a lot of my fellow millennials are not quite sure how to feel about all of this, and I get it. It's weird. Now that we're in our 30s, I think millennials around my age really have lived through several fashion eras, but we're just now kind of realizing it because these things are coming back around. And when I say these things are coming back around, I mean truly the styles of our youth are back, you guys. Hollister has baby doll sweaters and fur-lined zip-up hoodies. Target's women's section right now is almost all neon. It literally looks like my closet in 2010, 2011. It's kind of unbelievable. People are running around in chunky platform shoes and ballet flats and baggy jeans. I mean, walking around the mall right now, or really any clothing store or retail store that sells clothing, is truly like walking back in time, but like walking back in time in a dream where you recognize stuff, but something's not quite right. You know what I mean? Like the low-rise cargo pants don't belong next to the neon cutout off the shoulder top, but they are. They're all there. And of course, it's natural to evolve our own style a bit as the trends change over time. But I think we often don't really notice that these trend shifts are happening in real time. It's like that meme that says, like, one day we wore a graphic t-shirt over a lace cami for the last time and we didn't even know. We didn't even realize it. The trends just kind of shift and we move on. But now that we're seeing all these things reemerge, it's a reminder, a slap in the face, really, a very strong reminder that we've been through this before. We've seen all of this before. And of course, this is nothing new. Our parents would love to tell us this. Our fashion was recycled too. My mother loved to remind me this constantly when I was a kid in the late 90s, wearing like peace sign jewelry and giant flare leg jeans. But looking back, I can really see this kind of 30-year trend cycle pretty clearly. Whereas, of course, at the time, my mom was trying to tell me these things and I did not want to hear it. I recently went to see an old movie with my husband from the 50s. And the entire time, I think I was supposed to be concentrating on the movie, obviously, but I think the entire time I was really just looking at what the women in particular were wearing in the movie. And I was just thinking about how much these 50s fashions reminded me of the 80s. Because the 80s really did take a lot of influence from the 50s, especially in cuts and color palettes and things like that. And then, of course, the 90s was heavily influenced by the 60s. I lived through that. I loved it. The 2000s was so 70s influenced. It's almost crazy to me that I didn't see it at the time. Because looking back, I literally could have been wearing my mom's old clothes in the early 2000s. And I remember her telling me this. And I was like, I don't know what you're talking about. These are brand new. This is very original, Mom. This is my style, not yours. And then, of course, in the late 2000s and the early 2010s, we saw a lot of those 80s trends reemerge. And then other 50s influences like the pompadour hair, which we, of course, called the poof because of Snooki on Jersey Shore. But there's this trend cycle that happens. So now seeing so many of these things come back, and a lot of them at the same time, I think a lot of millennials feel kind of lost because, one, how are we old enough that this is happening? That's kind of a shock to the system. I don't care how old you are, but the first time you experience this, it's like, it kind of hurts a little bit. But also because the fashion that's popular now was popular when we were teenagers. It's like some weird time warp that's happening. And I think because a lot of us associate these clothes, these styles with being young, it makes a lot of people feel like trendy clothes are only for young people, only for teenagers. Like, I can't wear that because how can I wear the same thing that I wore when I was a teenager now that I'm in my 30s? It's just a weird thing for a lot of people to consider. And social media is not helping anything, by the way. Social media is very hard on millennials. We don't deserve so much hate. This whole idea of making fun of millennials, and especially making fun of millennials' clothes, has become such a meme and such an overdone joke. It's like anything we wear, whether it's in style, air quotes, or not, we're gonna get made fun of. Everything is chuggy or basic or whatever word that I probably haven't even heard of that's just designed to make fun of things that people like. So it's like we just feel clueless, and in a lot of cases, I think it makes a lot of people feel self-conscious about what to wear. And you think it'd be the opposite because, like, we've been through this already. If anything, we should be the experts on what to wear during these fashion trends, right? I think one of the most commonly asked questions that I get actually is, how do I feel about these trends coming back around? And I do think a lot of people expect me to be upset about it, not specifically about the trends coming back around, but about the younger generation interpreting them in their own way. But honestly, I'm enjoying seeing these trends return because it's like, I already know how to do this, you know, like we lived through this already. I know how to wear these things, but more importantly, I know what not to do. I know what is not going to work for me. And that's millennial superpower in this era of fashion, really, is like, we made these mistakes already, kids. We know. We know it. We've been through it. We learn the hard way. We know what does and what does not work for our personal style, our bodies, or just in general. Like, certain styles just shouldn't come back. But you know what? The younger generation will have to learn those lessons on their own, because I already learned it. I'm not going back there. The chunky chevron, the sequined slouchy purses that cut your armpit up, I learned those lessons. I'm not going back there. But by all means, if someone else would like to try it, test the waters, you go for it. But I think that's really key, not just as we get older, but also as the fashion cycles continue to move faster and faster and faster. It's about figuring out what works for you, what you feel good in, what makes you feel like you. And having the freedom to pick and choose which trends you're into and which just are not going to happen for you. And that's okay. Or just aren't going to happen for you at this time in your life. That's okay too, because there are certainly some trends that I thought were amazing, like height of fashion when I was a teenager, that I will not be rocking now in my 30s. Like ultra low rise anything that sits on or below the hip bone. I mean, I'm not even confident how I sat down or moved around in those as a teenager. It is not happening now. No, I'm sorry. It's not going to work for me. But I think a lot of millennials kind of shy away from anything that's too trendy right now, because it just feels a little too familiar, and not in a good way, in that like uncomfortable way. It's a strange feeling to be putting on an outfit that you feel like you might have also worn as a teenager when you're not a teenager. You're very far from being a teenager. I really like to mix and match items from different eras to kind of play with current trends without feeling like I'm cosplaying my younger self. You know, I don't need to be dressing in a theme. I'm not going to high school Y2K day. So I try to maybe do one item that feels really Y2K if I'm into it, and then the rest of it has to feel like it's from a different decade or a different era or whatever, a different fashion trend, so that I don't feel like I'm dressing in that theme. And of course, the new generation is interpreting these styles differently. They mix and match things from different eras already, because that's the way that this round of it is happening. Or they wear things paired with things that we never would have dreamed of, like wearing a going out top with baggy jeans and sneakers. We would have never. For us, a going out top was only acceptable if it was paired with a low rise flare leg jean and like a pointed toe kitten heel. Okay, we would never have dreamed of putting a sneaker on. But that's the beauty of the fashion trends coming back around. It's not going to look exactly the same. And also, we did this too. There's a lot of stuff going around about, Gen Z stealing millennial fashion or like doing it wrong or whatever. We fully did this too. 60s and 70s trends existed really simultaneously for us in the late 90s and early 2000s, which again, my mother would endlessly remind me. And she always had to tell me, well, that's not how we wore that. And the same thing, of course, is happening again. It's just that we're the old people now. And that hurts. I think that's what hurts. But trend cycles are also moving faster and faster and faster. And a lot of us feel like we cannot keep up. I hear this all the time. Microtrends and micro seasons are also much more prevalent now because of fast fashion and social media. Like when I think back to when I was a kid and a teenager in the 90s and 2000s, even air quotes, cheap clothes were much more expensive than the fast fashion offerings that we have now. Things like Forever 21 or Shein or whatever that sold $3 tank tops and like $18 jeans did not exist for us. So if I got a pair of, mud jeans from Kohl's for $30 in 1999, I wore those $30 jeans until I literally outgrew them. But by the time I was a young adult in the early 2010s, fast fashion was everywhere. I mean, it had exploded. It really was the dominant way that I shopped, for sure, being like a broke, 23-year-old in my first real job. And I think that's part of the reason why the fashion from that time looks so cheap now looking back. But regardless, we're in a fast fashion era now, and fast fashion really relies on constant consumption to make profit, really. So they have to kind of create new trends multiple times a year. 4 seasons a year is not enough for them to make money with the low prices that they sell their clothes. Plus, of course, these microtrends are so much more visible to us now because of social media. When we were young, we had to be exposed to these microtrends in real life, mostly. Things like, the goth kids at school, the emo kids at the mall, the kids who dressed in surf aesthetic because they worked at Zoomies or PacSun, the preppy kids who shopped at Abercrombie, McBling, rocker style, indie sleaze, whatever. We had to discover and be exposed to these microtrends, these kind of niche fashions, much more organically. Almost all of it was people that we knew in real life or kind of niche media, like certain television shows and kind of reality shows that emerged in the 2000s. But now it's just all at our fingertips, and it's fed to us constantly on social media. I mean, even if you're really not that into fashion, I almost guarantee that you've heard terms like coastal grandmother or clean girl or that girl or vanilla girl or whatever in the past year, because these things become trends on social media. And the result is really that multiple trends are existing simultaneously. But I do think there's still a dominant trend when it comes to clothing cuts and silhouettes that we see most often, and kind of what we think of as more classic styles now, which I do still think is very 90s inspired. And I love that. I'm all for the 90s. And then there are things like seasonality and economic factors, cultural factors that influence these microtrends too. I mean, last spring we saw a ton of Y2K, especially with the light color palettes like the pinks and the blues and kind of the silveries. And then the winter, this past winter, looked extremely 90s. Corduroy was everywhere. Plaid flannel was everywhere. There was this huge resurgence of hunter green on everything from people's walls to people's nails. And I was not at all mad about that, by the way. I was all for the hunter green. Like, yes, I do want a cable knit sweater the color of Kevin McAllister's kitchen. Thank you. And now we're seeing 2010s neons everywhere. If you lived through the neon era of 2010 to 2012, buckle up, because the flashbacks are so real right now. Do you want to know what I just bought at Target like 2 days ago? A neon coral chevron fake crocheted bikini top. I swear to you, I purchased that in the year 2023. I think I owned that in 2013, but here we are. I will say that the chevron is much different than the chevrons that we did in 2013. Again, things come back around differently, but still, it's a neon chevron bathing suit. It's like really recession core at its fullest. Like the styles that we saw in the very late 2000s and the early 2010s during that recession, they're back. But the timing, if you think about it, makes perfect sense. We're heading into spring, summer again, so bright colors are coming back. What's brighter than neon? Literally nothing. And a lot of people predict that we're heading into recession. So, why not bring back that Jersey Shore recession core era? And the ties between economy and world events and fashion and culture is a whole separate conversation, but it's all connected. Fashion is always a response to what is happening culturally and economically. Getting back to the return of the 2000s fashions, before any of my fellow 30-somethings panic, because that seems to be a common reaction, and understandably so. I don't think that we really need to worry about a full-blown 2000s takeover. I think that a lot of these things will continue to exist simultaneously, just like they did when we were young. There were tons of microtrends when we were younger. They're definitely moving much faster now, but they're not new. Microtrends are nothing new. In fact, some of my favorite fashion trends from the 2000s weren't really mainstream fashion, or at least aren't typically recognized now as having been mainstream fashion trends. So, with that in mind, I am going to end this episode by sharing my top 5 Y2K/2000s microtrends that I think deserve a little bit more love. Number 5, starting off our list, is the kind of Y2K era Eastern influence thing that was happening. This reminds me of Delia's catalogs. This also reminds me of a lot of the things that Mary-Kate and Ashley wore in Passport to Paris. There's this particular graphic that was on a lot of shirts and dresses around Y2K. It's in Passport to Paris at least 3 times. I think Gabrielle Union wears it in 10 Things I Hate About You. I'm not really sure what it is. And this trend definitely got a little bit of out of hand with some of the more blatant appropriations of Eastern culture. It got really campy too, like when we were wearing chopsticks in our hair. Too far. Backpedal a little bit. There were some actually nice, more subtle aspects of this trend that I really enjoyed, particularly the color palette and the fabrics. There were a lot of satiny fabrics and a lot of really rich jewel tones, and also a lot of textured fabrics and embellishments like beading that just felt more sophisticated and like a nice contrast against a lot of the other Y2K stuff that was really happening around that time. That was just a lot of brightly colored and like bold designs and a lot of pearlescent and kind of metallic, shimmery finishes that felt very young and playful, but not as mature. Number 4 is the early 2000s Western boho thing. This feels really specific to 2001 to me for some reason, but this was the whole style with like a lot of peasant blouses, tiered skirts, those braided fringe leather belts, or like a studded leather belt with a big silver belt buckle on it, those button-down shirts with pearl buttons, and the dirty wash jeans. Do you guys remember the dirty wash jeans? I very specifically remember purchasing a pair of dirty wash jeans from Abercrombie in 2001, and I wore them to school, and I remember a lot of people being like, why are your jeans green? They kind of had this like yellowish green tint to them. I don't know, Google it, but it was a very specific niche style. I always think of Coyote Ugly or a little bit of Mary-Kate and Ashley's style in their show So Little Time, especially that first season. The Buckle store around this time went really hard on this aesthetic. It was like boho with an edge. I don't know. I loved it though. I really, really loved it. I was all in on those peasant tops. Number 3, speaking of Y2K, is the Y2K surf aesthetic. Obviously one of my favorites. I've talked about it before. It's really hard for me to think of this as an actual micro trend because among tween girls such as myself at this time, this was fashion. I mean, this was the trend. This and like whatever American Eagle was selling at that time, that's all we needed when it came to fashion at this time. But I do think it was very much a micro trend. It's definitely very young. I don't think that there were probably many adults running around in hibiscus print board shorts at that time. I don't know. If you were an adult in 1998, please correct me if I'm wrong, but it just feels like a very young trend. It also screams Mary-Kate and Ashley to me, specifically Billboard Dad, but also a bit of Holiday in the Sun and Our Lips Are Sealed, really anything that they did that took place in any sort of like beach environment. Actually, now that I say that, this list is really making me realize how influential Mary-Kate and Ashley were to my style over the years. Very influential. Number 2 is the early 2010s boho style, also known as Coachella girl aesthetic. Vanessa Hudgens, circa 2013, is the epitome of this vibe. I know you all probably got the exact same image that just popped into your mind. It's what I'm picturing too. This was like a super distressed pair of high-rise frayed denim shorts with a sheer muscle tank cut t-shirt that was cut really low on the armpits so you could show off your neon or geometric print bandeau, and then a long like feather necklace or maybe an owl and some super uncomfortable gladiator sandals and a fringed crossbody bag and one of those headbands that went around your forehead. Maybe some feather hair extensions, maybe some flash tats. I don't know. I loved this, you guys. Those forehead headbands had me in a chokehold. I wore them for like 3 years. I shouldn't admit that, but I really did. I loved them. I literally thought I looked so cool wearing these outfits. I really loved all boho styles, but this era, I don't know, it stands out in my mind. I guess because I was a young adult and I could wear what I wanted, and this is what I chose. And this brings me to number one, my favorite micro trend of the 2000s, which is the post McBling boho era. This is mid to late 2000s boho, over accessorized, slightly homeless, dumpster divey chic. Again, this screams Mary-Kate and Ashley, like their NYU days when they were drowning in scarves and had like scraggly, long, wavy hair, but somehow just looked like chic AF. I wanted to wear everything they wore, even though looking back, it kind of looked like they just wrapped a scarf around their head, grabbed like a suitcase handbag and ran out the door. Not great. But Rachel Zoe and Nicole Richie really embodied this era for me personally, especially Rachel Zoe. It was like a baby doll top over some mildly distressed Seven for All Mankind flares with ballet flats and a huge oversized bag with a lot of metal accents, maybe some studs and chains, an armful of chunky bangles, some giant round bug eye sunglasses. Like, you can picture this, right? It was so good. I loved it. Everything was gold and copper and bronze, a lot of metallics. I still love it, actually. Honestly, if I could choose one style era to make a full-on big comeback, it would be this one. It was my favorite. But I guess the moral of this entire podcast was that everything is in style all at once right now. So, you know, let's do this. What's stopping us? 2000s boho, here I come. Let's bring it back. I'm going to wear my ballet flats to dinner tonight. I'm going to do it. But honestly, I really do think that now more than ever, personal style is so important. Trends are moving so fast, and there are so many things just happening all at once that really, it feels like anything goes. Find what you like and wear it. Whether that's 2007, 2010, a mixture of all of them, doesn't matter. Just wear what you like. So that is all for this week. As always, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to share it with a friend who also might enjoy it. Next week, I'm going to continue this conversation by talking a little bit more specifically about some trends from the 2000s and the 2010s that I would love to see make a comeback. And of course, some trends that I really do not want to see make a full comeback. So make sure you come back for that conversation. I will see you next week. Bye.